Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Tea with Che and Shy, the after show for Che Day on the beat with Ari Melber. I am, of course, joined as always by Chaitanya Komanduri, veteran of more than three presidential campaigns, and
Right.
I, of course, am Shyaporn Theerakulstit, D-list YouTuber. Today's topic: bipartisanship, or the myth of bipartisanship.
Right. It's more of like the myth of bipartisanship, I think, as far as Republicans are concerned. And I do think Democrats take bipartisanship or the idea of it much more seriously.
Right, right. Ari led off the broadcast with the famous Lucy and Charlie Brown football analogy. The Democrats keep falling for the Republicans' Lucy, holding that football of bipartisanship out. And but this time, President Biden just left the country. And is that really the only way to win? Is not to play the game?
Well, I think that you can understand what their view of the Republican view of bipartisanship is by the person McConnell sent to do the negotiations with Biden. It was Shelley Moore Capito, the Republican senator from West Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
Keep in mind what Biden proposed is the largest investment in green infrastructure in the nation's history. I mean, tremendous amounts of money for electric vehicles, for clean energy, for renewables, for solar panels, et cetera. And the person McConnell sends is basically the greatest friend that the coal industry has in the United States of America. And I don't think that's an aspersion on Shelley Moore Capito. I think Shelley Moore Capito is actually very proud to be a supporter of the coal industry and the fossil fuel industry in her state. But that's just the truth. I mean, she was somebody who was never going to sign off on Democratic priorities when it comes to environment and sustainability issues. And McConnell knew that. And McConnell knew that she was going to basically pare down the legislation. I mean, the bill that they have been offering Biden was simply one that they were too lazy to pass when they had full control of the government. There was no reason they couldn't have passed this when Paul Ryan was there and Mitch McConnell was there and Donald Trump was there. They could easily pass this and had Trump sign this. They were simply uninterested or too lazy to do so. And so now they're asking Biden to sign the Trump bill
Right.
with no acknowledgement at all about Democratic priorities when it comes to working families, when it comes to the environment, when it comes to progressive taxation. There has to be some kind of give to on these ideological, philosophical beliefs that Democrats have for there to be real bipartisanship. It can't just be a Democrat signing a Republican bill, which is what the way that they approached it.
So, what would you do about the as a solution to the divide and conquer strategy that's being employed with Joe Manchin and uh,
And Kristen
Stammer?
Sinema, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So Joe Manchin's kind of a unique. It's different from Sinema. I think the belief in Democratic circles about Kristen Sinema, and I don't know if that belief is going to be holding up anytime soon, but the belief always had been that she will become more progressive as Arizona gets bluer. That she was somebody who, it's in her bio. She worked for the Green Party, and she was quite
Right.
a left wing individual, and then she became a member of Congress, became much more centrist, and ran for Arizona Congress as a centrist, and is still talking up centrism as the reason for supporting the filibuster. But the belief among Democrats was always that, as Arizona gets bluer, she'll get bluer. That she's a real, authentic believer in progressivism and democratic ideas. Is just that she's in a very tough state. I mean, this is a state, Arizona, that is still recounting the last election. That's kind of how extreme the Republican Party in Arizona is. But it's
Right.
also a state that Joe Biden won. It's a state that is looking very good demographically for Democrats. And you can just contrast her with the other Democratic senator, Mark Kelly, who's made no sort of noise about wanting bipartisan compromises, and will only vote for those in any
Wait,
way.
did Democrats win Arizona? I thought
Yeah.
that was being overturned in
Oh, yeah.
September
That's
of
right. Yeah.
this year.
Well, they were looking. Arizona's a state where they're looking right now at the ballots to see if there's bamboo on them, to see if
Right.
it's been flown in from China. There is now another conspiracy theory in Arizona about ballots coming from Italy. I don't know why. I don't know what that's about. I don't know. I don't know. I have no idea what
those
Italy.
those Berlusconi ballots,
Yeah, but Berlusconi would be sending ballots on behalf of Donald Trump. Like
right?
I wouldn't be. He wouldn't be sending them on behalf of Joe Biden. Doesn't make any sense to me. And the populist government of Italy is very pro-Trump. So I don't know what the Italy thing was. I feel like that's something Giuliani floated at some point because he goes off in Italy. Or maybe they were saying Michael Corleone on his visit to Sicily. Well, it wasn't his visit; it's actually his sojourn in Sicily brought back some Biden ballots with him, or something like that. But that's kind of what's actually happening in Arizona. Arizona is actually the place where all this is occurring. So yeah, Kristen Sinema's in a very tough state as well. But the belief is that that state is going to go bluer, and the
It's
belief is
moving
always
blue.
yeah,
So,
the belief
do you believe she is actually at heart more of a progressive than she's presenting right now, or does she actually have more of these centrist, right-leaning beliefs?
So I have always believed the latter, that she was always a more of a progressive than she's presenting, and that she has to be a little bit more centrist because of that state. But
Mm-hmm.
this last couple of months, I don't know. I have to admit that my belief in that has been shaken a little bit. I think that the tour of the border with John Cornyn was a bit strange,
Mm-hmm.
that she had done that. And she's also not up for election until 2024. So it's quite some time for her. And Arizona is just going to keep changing in 4 years into
Right.
a more different state. So now it's a situation where it's a little bit of a puzzle as to where Kristen Sinema really is. But I've always been like an admirer of her political abilities. I've seen her rise. I've seen her campaign. I've always thought
Mm-hmm.
that she was a tremendous a political, it's a really talented politician. I don't know exactly if I have any of those beliefs about her ideology or where her ideology came from. It really is at this point now. I think it's something of a mystery. It's also interesting that she is very content to sit back and let Joe Manchin sort of be the leader on this, and she's kind of the silent person on this. But that also seems to be the strategy for other moderates in the Democratic caucus. Jeanne Shaheen, Maggie Hassan from New Hampshire, are also supposedly very staunch defenders of the filibuster as well. But they're all very happy for Joe Manchin to go out there and take the slings and arrows on
Right.
this. And I think Manchin kind of explained some of why that is when he said, well, progressives are unhappy with me. They can come to West Virginia and primary me, which they would absolutely get. They're not enough progressives even to do that. But in West Virginia, but I do think that if progressives, could mount a real primary challenge in New Hampshire or Arizona,
Mm-hmm.
that would actually be a problem for Sinema, for Shaheen, or for Hassan, if that were the case. So it makes sense to me why they are much more quiet, and why Manchin can just go out in front and just upset the left of the party so easily.
Right. You had talked on an earlier episode about how these senators and representatives in tough swing purple states, their political fortunes don't actually lie in bipartisanship. It lies in the success of President
Right.
Biden. Why is it so hard to convince them of that?
I think the main thing is ego. If you just
Mhm.
look at it just mathematically, if you just look at like senators and where they when they lose elections, and then you look at the presidential approval rating in that state, that just tells you everything you need to know. It doesn't really matter what they do or how popular they are or what positioning they take. What really matters is how popular or unpopular the president is in their states. There's almost no exception to that. And we talked, I think, earlier about Ben Nelson in Nebraska, and Ben Nelson was a Democratic senator in Nebraska. He had been the governor of Nebraska. He had a very viable Ben Nelson brand in Nebraska.
Mhm.
He had won pretty easy elections. He had a tough one in 2000 when he first got elected, and then a really easy re-elect in 06. So it was always believed that Ben Nelson, I think, always believed that he could survive because of his own brand. And that turned out not to be the case. I mean, politics also is much more national now. The picture is much more national. Everyone's now getting much more national news. Part of it also has to do with the decline of local press and local papers across the
Sure.
country. And so if you look at local press and local papers, there just is a much less of a space for Democrats to establish a brand identity in those states that are independent of whatever is going on with the president of the White House. It's now much more of a national political dialogue. And that national political dialogue is driven by the internet, national sources, national media like MSNBC, CNN, Fox, etc. Just much harder to establish any kind of independence of that.
Right, and national funding too, like in the Georgia race, Senate race at the end of last year. Money was pouring into that state from other states.
Yeah, I mean, Joe Manchin is going to be very reliant on national Democratic funding in 2024 when he runs for re-election. I mean, you know, all of the people who are unhappy with him now are going to be asked to give him money in 2024. West Virginia is a state where he can't raise money from small dollar donors. There's no grassroots donors of any kind that he can raise money from. Business interests that exist in West Virginia is the coal industry, which is going to be on the side of his opponent, regardless of who that is, no matter what his voting record is. So that's the fact. I mean, he's going to be very reliant on national money. And so I think also the outside influence of national money is a major factor, I think, with all of this.
Mm-hmm. So what movie, I think we talked about this a little bit, which movie do you think most closely aligns with this? I think you were on the side of the divide and conquer example being The Godfather.
Right. And I think one of the reason I thought that is because Trump and Giuliani talked about The Godfather incessantly. I mean, they were obsessed with it. And the divide and conquer strategy is nonstop in The Godfather. Except it's a much more, I guess one thing you could say, it's a much more stealthy strategy. So Don Barzini in the first Godfather convinces Tessio to go on his side with the offer that he could be the Don, not Michael. And in The Godfather 2, more famously, I guess Hyman Roth, played by the great Lee Strasberg, convinces Fredo, played by the great John Cazale, to betray Michael in Godfather 2. You know, with the offer that Fredo could be potentially the guy, the Don. So, I mean, the divide and conquer strategies is very common throughout the Godfather movies. You know, I think the more recent Marvel movies, the best example of probably Civil War, where Iron Man and Captain America are tricked into fighting each other because of the machinations of Zemo.
Of Baron Zemo.
Yes, or Baron Zemo. Yeah, now he is. I guess he was only called Zemo, I believe, in that movie, and now was revealed to be Baron Zemo in the TV show.
In the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, yes.
Right, Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Exactly.
That's right. Speaking of which, Loki is premiering tonight. Are you tuning into that?
Is that tonight?
It is. That's the big premiere tonight.
I guess you know what? I'm so used to Disney Plus shows dropping on Fridays that I totally was not aware of the fact that this is premiering tonight. And I kind of, in my mind, had thought that they were going to finish the Bad Batch and then do Loki, because I've seen ads for Loki.
Right.
But certainly I will, you know, that Tom Hiddleston is probably he's widely viewed as the best actor in the entire MCU. His performance as Loki is considered to be the star of the MCU. I remember that was very much a discussion.
Of villains or of all actors in the MCU?
You know, I remember like in 2013, 2014, thereabouts, people were saying that Hiddleston was the best actor in the entire MCU. I forget which film blogger was pushing that, and they were also pushing the idea that the biggest, you know, the breakout star of the MCU was Hiddleston. The breakout character was Loki. I
mean, that's true. He was the breakout star in character, obviously, because they made him an ongoing character instead of a one-off villain.
Right.
But I don't know. I feel like RDJ, Robert Downey Jr., certainly is up there.
Right. I think Robert Downey Jr. is definitely up there. But I also think by the time it ended, Chris Evans as Captain America ended up becoming very, very iconic. Mm-hmm. So I think all of those are very important. But I do remember, like, people were very just enamored of Hiddleston's Loki. You know, because it was both the Thor movie and then the Avengers, which was a $1 billion movie, of which he was the main villain. And so he was, he just became this huge breakout star in that role. And he had been, prior to that movie, just sort of a minor English character actor prior to Loki. I know there was a movie with Rachel Weisz that he was in that was actually very good. I don't remember exactly what it was called, but the name escapes me now. But he wasn't really a specifically big star until he'd done that.
Interesting. Well, yes. Hopefully, a little Disney Plus will soothe the crash of all my meme stocks today.
Right.
But was there anything else you wanted to say on the subject of bipartisanship?
Only that, I think that bipartisanship, I basically it's kind of like show me the money. The group of 20, the moderates in both the parties that want bipartisanship, they have to produce some kind of result. And I said this on the beat, and I'm saying this now. They have to produce some kind of result. I mean, what Joe Manchin did on voting rights was kind of the opposite of that, where he killed HR1, and then he says, well, there's this John Lewis voting rights bill, which is a very good piece of legislation. And I have Lisa Murkowski on this, but it's not enough. I mean, you still got to get it 9 more, before that's a real conversation about things. So I think that's been a major bugaboo, has been the absolute failure of the people who champion bipartisanship to produce bipartisanship.
What was the last significant bipartisan piece of legislation? Was it Dodd-Frank, or was there something more recent than that?
Well, Dodd-Frank was not particularly bipartisan. I think the last one that was really serious was George W. Bush, where he got 10 Democratic senators to vote for his tax cuts in 2001, which I guess was bipartisan, which is not, including Dianne Feinstein. While John McCain actually did not vote for them. And then, No Child Left Behind, where Bush worked with Ted Kennedy on No Child Left Behind. And then bipartisanship sort of collapsed right after that because Kennedy felt that Bush had betrayed him and reneged on funding and promises that Bush had made during the negotiations. So that if you want to talk about like the end of bipartisanship, that was really kind of when it ended. It ended after 9/11, when Bush felt he didn't have to be bipartisan anymore. He was so popular, he could kind of do whatever he wanted. But the pre-9/11 era was when you did see have bipartisanship. You certainly had Clinton and Gingrich work together, both on the balanced budget agreement. And then Bill Clinton worked with Orrin Hatch, the Republican senator, on CHIP, which was the child health care program.
Right, which Hillary Clinton had a large hand in as well.
Correct, and that the ACA hugely expanded CHIP as well. So, that was kind of the last. I mean, it was really, if you want to think about it, bipartisanship seems to have been sort of a casualty of the post 9/11 world. We haven't really had bipartisanship since 9/11. It really began under the Bush era, and then when Obama came to power, Republicans didn't want to work with him. And then Trump just didn't want to work, to be honest. I think that was more of a true thing, believe it or not, that if Trump actually had tried, he could have actually gotten some Democrats to work with him on different things like infrastructure and other things, but he just didn't want to work. So that was another aspect of it.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, Trump, for all his, quite frankly, evil, probably had enough charm to push through some forms of legislation that might have
He could have tried, but the problem was that also he would undercut everything by his insults and rhetoric and just racism and all the other things. So that was, I mean, he was almost elected to be sort of a thumb in the nose of bipartisanship, or thumb in the eye of bipartisanship. And but I don't think we've actually been able to restore the kind of bipartisanship that was more normative before 9/11.
Well, the metric of success for Republicans has become how much can they obstruct Democrats.
Right, and when you think about it, like if you look up a millennial politician like AOC, I mean, AOC has kind of only known a world where there was no bipartisanship. She has probably no memory of a world with bipartisanship.
Which is why she came out like last night swinging against the idea of bipartisanship. Yeah.
She has no memory of that. So I do think that's a factor.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that wraps things up. Thank you, everyone, for watching. For Chaitanya Komanduri and me, Shyaporn Theerakulstit, have a good night.
Thank you.